I'm Kat McDonald, and this is Rebloom Podcast, where we talk about self-care, travel, expat life, and anything else that Black and Brown women are doing to bring more joy into our lives. In this episode, I speak with Mitra Karimi-Taleghani. She's a multi-ethnic, queer, trauma-informed, anti-racist, sex-positive therapist. So Mitra, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Can you describe who you are and what you do?
My name's Mitra. I'm an associate clinical social worker. I'm working in private practice right now, and I am also in the midst of a play therapy certification. So when I complete that, I will be able to register as a play therapist. I am trauma informed, sex positive, culturally affirming, kink affirming. I'm an anti-racist, anti-oppressive practitioner.
I've heard the phrase trauma-informed therapy a lot. Can you explain what that means exactly, or what it means to you?
You know, there's a lot of terms floating out there these days, and a lot of folks might have their own perception of what that means. But being trauma informed to me means allowing my clients to have a lot of autonomy in their healing process. I'm also very mindful of language that I use. I oftentimes will offer movement, like to lead clients in movement, because I do feel that we hold trauma in our bodies. When I do lead my clients, I'm very, very mindful of the language I use, and it's more of an invitation, if that makes sense, than me like directing them.
Mm-hmm. On your website, you state that trauma can reveal itself somatically. So it sounds like that would connect. Can you talk about what that means for trauma to reveal itself somatically, and maybe how you work with that and movement?
I think for everyone, it can show up differently, but for some folks, it might be they have tightness in their hips, or maybe their shoulders, or just different parts of the body where they're holding that trauma. And so with the movement, I hope to like aid them in reconnecting to the body and opening up those spaces and releasing. I also was trained in trauma-informed yoga by Zabi Yamasaki, and that was a really great training. It was in addition to like a 200-hour training that I did prior.
A lot of us have forgotten how to play as we get older, right? As grown-ups.
Yeah,
can you talk about what play therapy is, what it looks like, and why play is healing?
Play therapy, it can incorporate so much. It's definitely an umbrella. So, you know, it can involve movement, games, expressive arts, storytelling. There's just so much that you can incorporate with it. And the training that I'm doing right now is for the entire lifespan. And so we study the neurobiology of play and how to apply it to each stage of life. Yeah, as far as like us forgetting how important it is to play, I think we tend to think, oh yeah, play, that's for kids, you know, and when we get older, we have to be all serious, and play is not for us and it's not accessible for us. And a lot of times, actually, folks just haven't had the privilege of having play accessible to them because maybe they had to grow up really fast or like take on adult like roles even when they were children. And I actually love incorporating play with those folks who like didn't even really get to play when they were younger. That's actually my favorite, is like helping them reconnect to their playful spirit and figure out what play looks like for them. For example, like I've had sessions where a client was feeling very anxious in the beginning of session and just having a hard time settling. And so I was like, hey, let's have a little dance party. And so for like 3 minutes, we danced to a song of their choice, and they felt a lot better after that. And we kind of could get into the flow of the talk therapy portion of our session. play therapy can look like anything, really. I really love doing expressive arts with folks because it can get people into that right brain, which is somewhere where it leaves a lot of room for the abstract. And
I'm just thinking about having a dance party with my therapist, and never in a million years would I think that that would happen. So you're, the
yeah,
therapy and the therapists that I've had personal experience with are very head centric. They're always about thoughts and
right.
thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. And it would be really, I guess, surprising and kind of freeing to have an experience where I'm just having a dance party with my therapist. Like, that's mind blowing.
I love it. And I definitely feel like, I'm not the therapist for everyone, because some folks actually do prefer a very, as you described it, like very heady, thought focused type of therapy. But it's all connected. I really feel like bringing the body into the therapy room is so important, however that looks for somebody. And I think even when I do, like when I lead folks in like the expressive arts, I really encourage, for example, like say a client is feeling really angry about something or just having, feeling a lot of rage. I'm like, yeah, let's figure out how you can alchemize that rage. And it could be through movement, or even with the expressive arts, as I was saying, I mean, just like splattering paint. I also offer walk and talk therapy.
Oh, that's great.
Love walk and talk
That
therapy.
sounds fantastic.
Whatever works for the individual, because I truly, truly believe that nobody heals the same way. And I'm very mindful of that when I work with my clients. Like, I'm very much working to figure out what works best for their individual healing journey. And I really tailor the sessions to my clients' individual needs. And I feel like that's super important. I definitely utilize an intersectional lens when I am working with my clients. And by that, I mean, I'm taking into consideration everything about, their identity and how the world perceives them, how they perceive the world based on their intersectional identity. And if I don't know, it's really important for me to be culturally affirming as well, because as someone who is multicultural, I know that that's a huge part of, how we navigate the world, and it really does influence us. So if I don't know a lot about a client's culture, I definitely do my own research, because I really want to be mindful and have an understanding and show up for them in the way they need and respect cultural expectations and all of that.
I was going to ask before we go to how you can choose a therapist, if you wanted to add something about how grown-ups can add play to their daily lives.
That really depends on the person. So I'll say for me, how I incorporate play into my everyday life is I definitely look for magic in the mundane. By that, I mean, I will literally just stare in awe at a little hummingbird when I'm on a walk and just like really act like I've never seen a hummingbird before. And so I think in mindfulness, it's called like a beginner's mind, and taking that approach to life. I feel like that can add a lot of playfulness and wonder to your life. If you're having trouble figuring out what does playfulness look like to me, sometimes it helps to think back on like, what did I like to do when I was a kid? Or if play wasn't accessible to you as a child, what would you have liked to do? And just kind of exploring and figuring that out.
When someone's looking for a therapist who's a good fit for them, what questions should anyone ask? And then are there additional questions or considerations that people of color, women of color should ask or look for when they're looking for a therapist?
For anyone, I would say if you have an idea of maybe a modality that you are interested in, for example, play therapy, Or if you are someone that is living with PTSD or complex PTSD, then you would, want to look for a therapist who specialized in trauma, or look for a therapist who is a certified play therapist or offers play therapy. And I know that sometimes folks are like, well, I actually don't even know what modality I would want to experience. And for that, I would say then maybe search for just qualities that you would want in a therapist. Because a lot of therapists, like myself included, we will give an idea of how we present ourselves. For example, on my profile, it says that I'm very warm and I'm playful. And these are all things that maybe might not work for everyone. Maybe someone wants something a little different, Really actually reading the bios is like crucial, because some folks are very descriptive about how they practice. And so you can get a lot out of reading the bios. And for people of color, I think personally, I think it's great to ask, do you utilize an intersectional lens? Are you aware of the effects of racialized trauma? What does that look like to you? How do you work with folks who are a different culture than you? How does that look? Are you culturally aware? Are you culturally sensitive? Are you culturally affirming? If I was like searching, I definitely look for a therapist who is actively saying that they are anti-racist. And then, so you could even ask, like, what does that mean to you? Someone that has anti-racist on their profile. And yeah, I think asking a lot of questions, I think folks sometimes don't feel comfortable really questioning a therapist, but absolutely question them. Question what's on their profile and how they apply that to their work, because anyone can really write like, yeah, I'm anti-racist, I'm but how do you show up for your clients, and how do you really show that in your work, I think is important to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start going to a therapist, even if you're like 5 sessions in, but then you realize, you know what, actually, this therapist is not a good fit for me, absolutely look for someone else. You do not have to stay with the same therapist if they are not working for you, even if in the beginning you thought, okay, yeah, this might work out. And I think some folks forget that they can leave and look for someone else anytime they want. They do not have to be married to the same therapist just because they've had, maybe even if you've been with them a year, if you decide, you know what, this isn't for me anymore, I need something different, or maybe I've just outgrown this therapist, I really encourage folks to definitely move on and find another therapist. And if you feel comfortable letting your therapist know, that's great. If you don't, that's also great, because you don't have to caretake for your therapist. The therapist is there for you, and your healing is the most important part of that. I always, even in consultations, I'm like, if something ever doesn't work for you, please let me know. If you decide that we're not a good fit after a certain amount of time, it will not hurt my feelings, because this isn't about me as the therapist,
You don't have to
Yeah.
caretake your therapist. That's super helpful.
A lot of folks just genuinely have that personality where they're very much a caretaker, and they worry, oh, will this hurt my therapist's feelings if I, don't want to go to them anymore? And you know what? It's not your job to make sure your therapist is feeling okay about you wanting to move on. It really isn't. And I think, a good therapist will make that clear, that it's not about them and it's not going to hurt their feelings, and you don't owe them anything. It's about you and your healing and what's best for you.
That's great. That's really good to remember.
Yeah.
The external stressors of the past year and a half or 2 or 5 or whatever have been so universal or so widespread. There's so much anxiety, stress, and I think the stigma around getting help around mental health is decreasing. I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing too. I really do. And that's why I'm so adamant about really letting folks know, like, you have full control. Because a lot of folks are seeking therapy for the first time, and they're like, I don't even know where to begin. And honestly, it can be overwhelming if you're just like, okay, let me look for a therapist in my area. And then there's this long list of therapists with, all these modalities listed on their profiles, and maybe you don't know like what some of them are. And it can just feel really, really daunting.
Yeah. And if you're trying to like figure out the cost or who takes your insurance or who doesn't, and,
Oh, yeah.
now there's like
Oh,
teletherapy thrown in there and,
right. I forgot to mention that it's important to ask if a therapist is offering sliding scale options, because a lot of therapists maybe are, but maybe they don't have it on their profile. It's always good to ask if there's sliding scale options, like if they don't take your insurance or something, because a lot of folks do offer sliding scale fee.
I've heard the phrase therapy is political. Do you believe this
Yes.
to be true? And if so, what does that mean to you?
Okay, well, I'm kind of gonna talk a little shit about the mental health system right now, but a lot of us are kind of taught to be this like blank slate, apolitical therapist so that we appeal to the masses. And I think that is a privilege if you can be an apolitical therapist, because as a person of color who is also a mental health professional, I am absolutely political. And I think that's clear in the fact that I've talked about being anti-racist and culturally affirming. And I don't feel like you can be apolitical as a social worker, because how can you be apolitical and also work towards social justice? It just doesn't compute in my brain. So I definitely feel like therapy is political. I think it's important to talk about the systems of oppression and systemic racism, institutionalized racism. Like, it's extremely important to address these issues. That's also why I'm not the therapist for everyone, because I definitely do have a political stance, and it's definitely obvious.
So as a therapist, how do you hold space for other people's pain and healing without taking it on yourself?
Ooh, yeah, that's hard. I would be lying if I said I never felt other people's pain sometimes after sessions. The way that I handle that is my own healing and self-care and community care is mandatory. I have to also really nurture my own healing, because it's hard to not really feel for folks when you're holding space for them, when you empathize deeply. And I work with communities that are extremely, extremely important to me, and I'm very passionate about it. And I really do put my whole heart into my work. So I'll be honest, sometimes I do struggle with feeling emotionally depleted sometimes, and not because my clients are doing anything, really just because there's so much sadness and injustice and pain in the world and in a lot of my clients' lives, and I feel for them. I definitely put a lot of effort into my own healing, whether that be going to therapy every week, which I do, and I also box. That's actually how I alchemize my rage. There's something about boxing that is such a release for me, and not only alchemizing rage, but just I am someone who lives with trauma myself, and I very much feel it in my body. I feel it mostly in my hips. They're like extremely tight. And so having solo dance parties, like when I'm feeling down and maybe I don't have my therapy session that day, maybe I don't, I'm not going to box that day or whatever. I'll turn on the most random song and just dance my little heart out by myself until I'm like sweaty. And that just feels so good to me. But it definitely changes for me on the day to day, like what I need for my healing. Sometimes it's just being cozy and laying around all day and maybe watching something that brings me joy. I actually love scary movies. I don't know why. Maybe because it's a controlled scare. Like I'm safe and cozy in my home. And I write a lot. I also draw and paint. I'm not like a professional artist or anything. It's definitely just expressive. And when I say community healing or community care, I have a really amazing support system that I feel like we all kind of lean on each other and show up for one another. And we're very mindful of asking, like, hey, do you have the capacity for this before we kind of express what we're going through to one another? And yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to, I'll say. It's hard not to be affected sometimes, you know?
Emotionally challenging work.
Yeah.
What does sex positive therapist mean?
So for me, being a sex positive therapist means that I am basically non-judgmental of however someone likes to express themselves sexually. That's like the most simple way I can put it. And I'll give an example. Like I love working with folks in the kink community, the BDSM community, and I just am very open and non-judgmental, and I just like to provide folks with resources. I like to destigmatize things. BDSM is such an umbrella, but there's a lot of power play happening under this umbrella, and it's very stigmatized. A lot of folks have a lot of opinions about it, even other therapists, I would say. But actually, I've found that a lot of folks find this power play to be very healing, and a lot of folks even find pain to be healing. And something about kink is that it's all about safety and being consensual. Communication is a huge part of it. I just love working with folks who find joy in expressing themselves in this way. And I find a lot of joy in like destigmatizing it and providing resources. For me, it's basically just holding space for folks and helping them feel like nothing that they do is strange or weird. I'm like very affirming in it. I'm just like, that's amazing that you express yourself in this way. I really just hold space for them to process how they feel about it. I really love working with couples who are navigating new things in the bedroom. It's very fun, lighthearted work a lot of the time. Sometimes it can be heavy because, anytime I think we're discussing sex, there could be some trauma that comes up. So I do feel grateful that I come from a very trauma-informed lens. Yeah, I really just act as like a sounding board and someone who can provide resources for further exploration, like outside of the therapy room.
You're really making me think that I need to up my therapy game, because never have I had a dance party with my therapist. Never have I literally never talked about sex with my therapist. I just don't feel comfortable.
Really?
Yep. Never have.
Yeah.
Which now sounds ridiculous, but yeah, no.
No, it's not ridiculous. Maybe, you just haven't come across a therapist that makes you feel comfortable to talk about it. I mean, it's in my profile that I am a kink affirming therapist. I'm also like an ally for sex workers. Like I love to work with folks who are sex workers because unfortunately they are very stigmatized. And I have heard horror stories from folks about how they felt extremely judged by a clinician, and that's just appalling to me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about therapy or about healing, play?
Healing is not a linear process. It's not like, okay, I'm starting at point A, and then when I get to point Z, I'm going to be healed. Now, this is my opinion, but I feel like a lot of folks would agree with me. But I also don't believe there's ever like this end goal of I'm fully healed. It's a lifelong journey healing, and I don't think that has to be looked at in like this daunting way of like, oh man, I'm going to have to heal forever. I think it's like a really beautiful thing, and healing doesn't look the same for everybody. So maybe therapy is for you, maybe it isn't, but definitely explore and figure out what feels good to you and what works for you, and always advocate for yourself. I'm going to say that again when it comes to therapists. If you're not feeling heard, if you're not feeling, safe with a therapist, and even if you can't put your finger on what exactly it is, if your nervous system is telling you this just doesn't feel right, listen to it and figure out what's best for you, because at the end of the day, we're all experts on ourselves and what we need.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your knowledge. This is helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Rebloom Room Podcast. You can find links to Mitra's website and related resources at rebloomroom.com/podcast. And if you like this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time.